Through Banta's vivid observations, we get a glimpse of the Comanche way of life in the mid-19th century. His accounts capture not only the harsh realities of frontier life, but also the complexity and humanity of a people often misunderstood. His first-hand experiences remind us that history is more than just dates and events. It's about the people, their stories, and the unique details that bring them to life.
In the fall of 1849, the frontier settlers of Texas lived in constant fear of Indian raids, particularly from the Comanche tribe, which numbered around 3,000 people. The tribe was divided into two factions, each led by a commanding chief, Buffalo Hump and his cousin, Yellow Wolf. At the time, they roamed the western border of Texas, often moving between the Davis Mountains near the Pecos River and the Wichita Mountains. From their base in the Davis Mountains, they conducted raids into Mexican frontier settlements, leaving devastation and despair in their wake. Despite being separated into northern and southern factions, the Comanches often united to defend themselves against the Mescalero Apache tribe, a fierce group numbering around 3,600 who lived in the region near the headwaters of the Rio Grande. These clashes were brutal, as both tribes were known for their boldness and warrior spirit. Adding to this volatile landscape, a Seminole chief named Wild Cat led a coalition of about 600 warriors from various tribes, setting up headquarters at the head of the Red River. Wild Cat's group, often at odds with other tribes like the Mescalero Apaches, spurred the Comanche factions to consolidate their forces. In 1848, Wild Cat formed an alliance with the northern and southern Comanche tribes and was elected head chief of the united group. Buffalo Hump and Yellow Wolf retained command of their respective factions, but Wild Cat became the overarching leader. The consolidation of these forces marked a turning point for the Comanches. By 1852, they had agreed to a peace treaty with the Apaches along the San Saba River, near the old Spanish mission. Around the same time, treaties were also signed with the United States and several other wild tribes. After this period, the United Comanche Group inhabited what is now Arizona and New Mexico, still relying on traditional weapons like bows, arrows, lances, and tomahawks, as only a few had access to firearms. The Comanche people had a unique way of life, deeply tied to the buffalo. They had remarkable skill in hunting these massive creatures. On horseback, they would chase buffalo at full speed, wielding long lances with precision. Once the animal was brought down, the lancers moved on to the next while others skinned and butchered the carcass. The meat was cut into strips and dried in the sun, while the hides were handed over to the women, who used an intricate process to prepare them for clothing, bedding, or shelter. Their wigwams were crafted from buffalo hides, stretched tightly over poles arranged in a conical shape, with a small opening at the top for smoke to escape. The fire was built in the center of the tent, and the family would sleep in a circle around it. This was a simple but practical design. They had little regard for personal hygiene, with body lice being common. They didn't have a structured eating schedule or sleeping habits. The men spent their leisure time playing games with Mexican cards, while the women performed most of the labor. The children entertained themselves with bows and arrows, hunting small game like birds and prairie dogs, and spent hours climbing trees, leaping from branch to branch, or swimming in rivers where they became expert divers and swimmers. Wild Cat, the head chief of the Comanche, was 6 feet 1 inch high, weight 147 pounds, portly, with a determined look, eyes like an eagle, shaded by jet black heavy eyebrows. In 1852, he seemed to be about 45 years old. He was positive but quick-spoken and talked broken English, his hair plaited with other hair woven in until it reached the ground. He wore a traditional Seminole headdress consisted of a silver band some 4 inches wide, which was slipped down over the top of his head, with 3 tubes in front containing 3 beautiful feathers, the one in the center the longest. On the back of his neck, he wore a solid silver plate about 4 inches in diameter, and down the braid, about 4 inches apart, were silver plates less in size until they reached the ground. At the end of the plate, he wore 3 silver bells, which jingled on the ground as he walked. These bells were very small, each about the size of a thimble. His mantle or shirt was of blue, neatly trimmed with red, beautifully decorated with silver designs, the fastening resembling a Catholic cross. His leggings were of well-dressed buckskin, with all manner of beaded designs, and on the outside seams were numerous little bells, keeping up a continuous jingle as he walked. His moccasins were covered with small beads of every color, put on so as to make them very attractive, and he wore a fine Mexican blanket in place of a shawl. He was very communicative, polite, and firm in conversation. He had 2 wives, both of whom seemed to worship him, one or both ever being present and ready to come or go at his bidding. In conversing with either of his wives, his manner was mild, every word spoken in a low, soft tone of voice, with a kind expression of countenance and very modest gestures. His wives would listen with interest, and now and then sanction with a modest nod of the head or pleasant smiles. Buffalo Hump, in contrast, was shorter at 5 feet, 8 inches and stockier, weighing around 175 pounds. He had a resolute, faraway look, as though always searching for something unseen. Unlike Wildcat, his attire was simpler, but still neat. Buffalo Hump's personality was serious and stern, though he was an almost constant smoker, using his long tomahawk as a pipe. He was silent demeanor and slow speech, noting that his presence alone could command attention. Yellow Wolf, the smallest of the 3 chiefs at 5 feet, 5 inches, was quick and cunning, with a sharp, piercing gaze. His movements were graceful, and he carried himself with an air of confidence. Though not as imposing as the others, he had a fierce countenance and a quick wit. He was neatly dressed and noticed his wife, who was always nearby, modestly adorned with ornamental feathers, silver jewelry, and beads. Yellow Wolf's young son, still fastened to a cradleboard, hung from the center pole of their tent, looking as alert
Indians
and watchful
and,
as his father.
The Samoan war chief called a Wildcat, and it was kind of interesting when I first read it. I was trying to figure out like how Wildcat and Buffalo Hump and Yellow Wolf knew each other, and then doing some research for the last several days, it came to my, and this is just my opinion, I haven't connected the dots just yet, and that's why I wanted to make this kind of comment on the back end of this video. So, Banta does talk about these 3 war chiefs quite a bit, and I've only kind of like touched the very surface, but he does do a kind of like a deeper dive throughout this book that we will look at, and so it may answer some of these questions that at least I have right now, because I'm trying to figure out, how did Wildcat, Buffalo Hump, and Yellow Wolf all get together and become friends and comrades? Because at this moment, between 1851 and 1852, I have not figured out how to connect those dots. So I'm just letting you know, on my end, if I have a question, I'm going to just kind of do these at the end, and then that way maybe we can find the answers together.